What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of JaAR. JaAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe
and Amy
Review. It's our weekly show where we review the magic stories as they're posted on Wizard's website. We are still here on Dominaria, and we are here this week for Return to Dominaria, Episode 10, once again by Martha Wells. My quick review at the top. This one is probably going to be really tough for a quick review, but there's one word to quick review it with, and that's Slimefoot. If you care about Slimefoot, if you're interested in some characterization for Slimefoot, as well as some other lesser characterized characters that we've met so far, this is mostly original characters, aka characters that are being seen for the first time in Dominaria, this version of Dominaria, and so I would say if that's something that interests you, then I would go check it out. There were some, like I said, there was some cool characterization, and in terms of overarching for the entire story, I feel like if you don't read this one, you won't be missing much, because if you know who Slimefoot is and how they got on the Weatherlight, then in terms of, like I said, in terms of impact for the rest of the story, I don't know that it matters as much. But if you're looking for a light, fun story, I think this one was it. Like I said, I thought this one was a little tough to quick review, but what maybe you thought it was easier?
Well, until you said all of that, yeah, I did think it was easier.
All right, go ahead, please. Maybe you'll have to just listen to her.
Maybe I'll have to just say a lot more in the quick review now. I was going to say that it is weird. But now I should elaborate by saying that I disagree with you already.
Sure. Well, so, okay. All right. So do you, I guess, sorry for saying so much in the quick review, but do you recommend the story or not? And why?
Yes.
Can you say why, or would that be for the full review?
Full review.
Okay. So then, yes, Amy and I both recommend it, and you know, it like I said, light and fun, and so we recommend that you do that. Check the description. In the description box below, we will have a link to the story. If you have not read it yet, please feel free to go do that, because as we say here, we review, we do not summarize. So you will want to read it for yourself before we talk about it, because we're not going to be talking about it in any particular order so that you'll understand how the story went. We assume that you already have, so that you can then give us your opinions as well. So yes, on to the full story itself. Please start us off. Let me know why you might have disagreed with okay. What I ramblingly said at the top.
You started by saying Slimefoot.
Yes.
I don't think that the story is about Slimefoot.
Okay.
It was done from Slimefoot's point of view, but I don't think it really was. It seemed to be fakely done from Slimefoot's point of view. It was really more from a narrator's point of view. A narrator that weirdly lives knowing what Slimefoot thinks.
Well, it's like third-party omnipotent, but
yeah,
but it's not, because it's I guess first-party omnipotent, because it's, or first-person omnipotent, because it's only focused on what Slimefoot thinks and feels, so it doesn't know what Gideon is thinking per se when we see Gideon.
Right. I mean, we can hear what Gideon says.
Yes.
And what other characters say, but we don't know what they're thinking per se. There were a couple of moments in there where I was really like, it's quite a stretch that this creature has any clue what these people are thinking. Mm-hmm. There were a couple of instances where I was like, why? Why are you saying that right now? Because there's nothing to make me believe that Slimefoot would know this.
Yeah, it was a little bit of Jace alone type stuff going on here, where I was like, how am I supposed to know what Slimefoot understands versus what they don't? And a lot of it was...
Even if that was coming from a place of Slimefoot doesn't understand what Slimefoot understands, it still felt weird. It felt like it was being told by a ghost who followed Slimefoot around instead of by Slimefoot.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was weird.
And it's interesting. I want to go back to a moment for myself before I even started reading this story. Because last week, if you were here last week with us, we were, we had some discussions about last week's story. And I suggest you go watch the episode. It'll be linked at the end for you. But it might also just be on the side and recommended if you're on YouTube. But last week we felt like a culmination. And I felt like it was possibly the first, a lot of stuff is happening story. And so I was ready for that trend to continue this week.
Yeah, especially since there are so few stories left.
And right, this is 10 of 12. And so when I saw that we were getting Slimefoot this week, what was the word that you used for what this story was? What was it to the fans?
Pandering.
And Slimefoot's cool.
And I'm sorry, but pandering to fans that like Slimefoot, but not pandering to fans who actually care about the story and therefore would want a better story? I mean...
Well, so what we did was, with these stories, we went from a bunch of stories about characterization, or a bunch of stories about backstory, if you will,
yes,
for characters like Tiana and Arvad, for the entire gathering of the Weatherlight crew, for Teferi and his daughter, even for Jaya Ballard, right? We got backstories for all of them. And then it was like, cool.
It was a backstory convention.
And then it was like, cool, everyone is together now in episode 9. Let's get ready to go to the stronghold.
Right, finally. Because by episode 9, we should be there. We should be approaching the climax of this story.
And again, we were ready for it after last week, where it was like, oh, cool, everyone's together. You've even got Jace appearing and being a bit of a dick, and there's a lot of controversy behind that Jace appearance scene, which we partially got into last week and we'll partially get into in weeks to come, but that's not this week. But it was the culmination. Everyone was together. Everyone was there. Teferi, Joyra, and Karn were back together again, talking to each other. This was the moment that everybody was looking forward to, I feel like. With everybody coming together. This is the big moment. Let's go fight Belzenlock, right? Let's go help Liliana, who, again, this story is, at the end of the day, all of these stories are focused on Liliana in one way or another.
Or kind of supposed to be, but
correct,
maybe not necessarily doing it.
And then I look at the preview for this week, and it's like, now we're talking about Slimefoot. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I felt like I slammed into a brick wall.
Right. When he showed me that, I was like, so mad. I was like, you've got to be kidding me.
And
that we're now talking about Slimefoot, this super insignificant, seemingly insignificant character, when we're supposed to be getting to the meat of this story. Finally! We still haven't gotten there.
And I'll talk more about that concept at the end, but because we are on the internet and I don't want to get torn a new asshole in the comments, I like Slimefoot as a character. And I'm not just saying that to pander to Slimefoot fans. So don't hate me here. We love the Gitrog monster, right? We love, meme characters. I love me some Yargle. Yargle is amazing, okay? Slimefoot is super cool and an interesting concept. This was not the place to put in Slimefoot.
Right.
And like I said, that's going to be my closing out theme for this video, so stay tuned for that, for more on that. But that's why I wanted to go back to, before I even started reading the story, this is where my head was at. This is where my expectations were of like, why? Yeah. Why Slimefoot now? This is the time where you're supposed to be ramping up. We've got 2 story spotlights left. Now, granted, one story spotlight, number 3, is of Liliana fighting and presumably killing Belzenlock. And 4 is of her going to Bolus. Seemingly, from what I would understand about how those things work in tandem, it would seem that 3 happens, bam, Bells and Luck's dead, 4 happens. Right? It seems like it would be one after the other because it's in Bolus's clutches. Liliana's like, great, I'm done with all my demons, and Bolus is like, cool, you work for me now, right? It should be instantaneous. So I can understand if it might be in one story or it might be in back-to-back stories, but at the same time, there's still a lot to unpack, and if you've been watching our show long enough, I don't want this to be Eldritch Moon, where there's a lot left to do, and then they just throw it all at us
into one story,
yeah,
shoddily,
yeah,
and have us be like,
yeah.
what?
Throw
Why?
it all at us at once because you had to take time for Slimefoot.
Why? Because in the previous stories you had so much time, and you were wasting it on insignificant people or things or events.
Yeah.
And then just all of a sudden you pack everything important into 1 or 2 stories. That's insane. That's just insane.
So now here's the way that I want to do this. That is how this story works in the grand scheme of Dominaria. Now I'd like to focus on just this story as somewhat of a standalone.
Okay.
Because, as I said at the top, and I meant it and I still feel that way, this was a light and fun story. I enjoyed it. And in fact, to, I guess, partially go back to what I was saying earlier, while I went into this being kind of upset about, like, why the hell are we doing this now?
Right.
After reading the story, or while I was reading the story, I found myself chuckling. I found myself smiling and enjoying what I was reading. It was written very well. And it was done very well. And it was, I don't want to say very comedic, because I think that takes away from all of what the story was, but I think it had some good comedic elements, despite what we've said in the past, where I've been like, oh, this part was supposed to be comedic. And Amy's like, no, it wasn't. You know what I mean? So, like, I enjoyed the comedic moments, I enjoyed the touching moments, and I enjoyed the characterization moments, as well as just the kind of, this is an interesting character for us to meet.
Yeah.
So, to actually delve in and talk about that stuff, I appreciated a lot of things that this story did. For example, the callbacks, like when Slimefoot is still in its smaller phase or its earlier life phase, where it's on the outside of the ship, the hull, and it's like, this is where I have lived forever, and now I'm not in the water anymore, and I'm aware of that, and there are creatures or whatever. And then it kind of notices that there's fire, right? And that the creatures that were around it are now scared and dealing with the fact that there's fire and yelling and a lot of loud noises. And Slimefoot knows fire bad. I'm a fungus, fire bad. I'm going to force myself to evolve slightly or, progress slightly and get myself onto this ship, which was a very difficult ordeal for it. And then that moment was cool for those of us who have been reading the story and who have remembered enough of the story to know, like, oh, that was the Phoenix attack, right? They hadn't taken off yet into the sky, and it was the workers who were trying to still rebuild the ship, and then you had fire happen. Well, as far as we know as readers, from the moment that the ship was brought up and regrown from Molomo's seed to when they flew and took off, what happened fire-related? Not Chandra and Jaya. So it must have been the Phoenix attack with Tiana and Arvad from, I don't know, like episode 4 or something. I might be wrong. So I personally appreciated that little bit of a callback. I don't know if you had any strong opinions either way.
I think it's kind of cool that they sort of showed the lifespan of Slimefoot.
Okay.
Instead of just like, okay, we'll just pick it up at the present,
Right, so almost like how long the gestation period took to get from, little guy on the outside of the hull to full-grown, what we see in the art, which we'll get to in a second. Yes, and then making, sprouts of its own or whatever. And then talking about the white star, which is the thing that is telling Slimefoot everything it needs to know about the ship and its inhabitants. And it's a combination, from what I understand, that white star is a combination of the power stone that runs the ship combined with Molomo's seed that helped grow Slimefoot, as well as, regrow the ship, if you will. So that's what I got from that. But I appreciated that both of those things were utilized, both of those themes, if you will, were utilized as callbacks. And not just callbacks, but arguably Easter eggs. And Easter eggs is a very big deal in geekdom, I feel like, especially these days, but I feel like it's always been there. A lot of video games, like if you're on YouTube right now, if you look up, video game Easter eggs, there's a million of them, right? You want to look up movie Easter eggs, right? I'm a big Marvel Comics fan, so I'm going to bring up Marvel, but Marvel, DC, whatever you want to say, right? If it's an established property, I'm sure Star Wars has done it many times as well, Lord of the Rings, like all of these properties that put in little hints, little things that if you're not a big fan of the property from before the movie came out or the story or whatever, what have you, then you might gloss over it. It's just part of the story to you. But if you get it, then it means that much more to you, and it doesn't detract from other people who might not know and their enjoyment of it. Now, within Dominaria's story in and of itself, is that so much of an Easter egg? Maybe. I mean, it's a little bit of a callback. If you didn't remember the Phoenix story, or if you weren't reading, if you took my advice from last week and started reading from episode 9, and then went through, you wouldn't need to know that there was a Phoenix attack. What does that matter? It was just, there was fire, and that was what spurred Slimefoot on to getting into the ship. I enjoyed that.
Okay.
Did you? Okay.
Ready to move on.
That was just my point then. I got it. No problem. So I appreciated that Easter egg. Then you have that concept of Slimefoot knows fire bad. You even have Slimefoot going around and kind of describing different characters in its own way by saying, there are people that use fire and the ship's not fully familiar with them, and I don't like them because they use fire, but the ship seems to be okay with them, so I guess I'm okay with them too. And it's like, okay, that makes sense. You're talking to the ship. The ship is what's giving you the knowledge of the people around you and the world around you so that you know that you're safe and comfortable as you grow. And you've got people like Shauna and Raph, who are mentioned as having a familiar scent almost, or a familiar bloodline, because they are Capuchins, or right, they're descendants of Shauna, Sisay, or of Sisay and of the Capuchins, JaAR. I don't know why I couldn't remember his name. Wow, real bad, guys. Sorry about that. But yeah, of JaAR and of Captain Sisay that used to be on the ship. The ship recognizes them. Joyra is the ship's favorite. Makes sense. She's the damn captain. So, but those things were kind of cool just to again, light and fun to just toss in there. And it's like, oh, that's cute. Right? I don't know.
Yeah,
that's how I felt.
That was cute.
Yeah.
And that was what kind of redeemed this story, but at the
Yes.
same time, like I said, it was weird, and it was awfully placed. Because
Yes.
It wasn't.
Yes, and that's in the
It made sense to have this here.
Yes, and that's in the grand scheme. And again,
Right.
we'll get back to that. But I also liked things like further characterizing Slimefoot, in Slimefoot not being able to understand Tiana's sarcasm. Like Tiana thanked Raph when Raph came in and made some kind of a comment about Slimefoot. Tiana's like, thanks, Raph, that's super helpful. And or that's great, I appreciate that. And Slimefoot's like, I don't think Tiana appreciated that. Even then, because it's sarcasm, but Slimefoot doesn't understand sarcasm. So I appreciated that. I thought that makes sense. That made sense. And then we have the Raph Slimefoot interactions. Every time that Raph sees Slimefoot and the little babies, oh, hi, Phalids, hilarious. That's super funny to me. And then the fact that Slimefoot felt such a connection to Raph because of his friendliness and his understanding, that it's friendly, yeah, that Slimefoot was willing to say to its spores, like, stay with Raph, I'm gonna go check out what's going on the roof. And Raph's like, hey, you forgot your babies. And Shauna's like, no, you're just the babysitter, dude. Like, that's what happens.
Funny.
Yeah, I liked that a lot. I thought that was very creative and fun and interesting. Plus, seeing Shauna and Raph kind of banter back and forth with each other was a nice touch as well, because again, these are characters who were introduced in one story, right? The first story when JaAR went out to recruit them, and by them I mean Shauna, and then got Raph instead of Danitha, but still, got her crew. And after that, they've kind of been afterthoughts at best, right?
There was no development.
No, bit characters at best and non-existent at worst in scenes where they could have existed, right? Raph has been nothing more than quips about planeswalkers entering and leaving randomly, right? That's what Raph has been up until this story.
Even though he's a mage, like, he might be helpful in some way, and they're kind of not taking him seriously, and maybe that's because he's a funny guy, or maybe that's because he's young.
Or maybe that's because he's a mage on a ship with Teferi, Karn, Liliana, Gideon. You know, like, he's a super powerful mage in terms of he studied at the Talarian Academy-ish and was good there and knows what he's doing, but he's not an all-powerful planeswalker, a time mage, a necromancer, a pyromancer. You know what I mean? Like, all of these people kind of, I think.
Whatever, I think it's rude.
You think what's rude? That they're not focusing on him more? Well, I think, you know what?
I just think it's rude for the other characters to kind of treat him like he's not there.
Fair enough. Well, and I would have thought that this story might have been an implication that there's a lot more going on behind the scenes with these characters that we're just not seeing.
Okay.
That's a good point. Which makes me annoyed that we're not seeing it.
Yes.
But at the same time, right now I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth because I'm like, stop focusing on characterization and get to it. But then at the same time I'm like, but I want to see more from these characters. And it's like, yes, but my point at the beginning was, don't get us into the hype mode of everyone's finally together. This is the Avengers camera circle scene with all them holding their weapons, right? They don't do that and then cut to Nick Fury to talk to Coulson and Maria Hill. They then cut to the Avengers fighting the Chitauri. Because that's what happens immediately following that scene. You've put them all together, now show us what they can do as a group. That's the point. And they didn't do that here.
The point is that it can be done. Look at Kaladesh and Aether Revolt. Those were meaty stories. You can say that those stories were done in an efficient manner. Mm-hmm. You gave us so much in just one story. Every time we left that story feeling like we know those characters better and stuff happened to them. We didn't have to choose which it was going to be, and we didn't have to just lay in waiting, like hoping that they would get to something. You know, that didn't happen in those stories.
Yeah.
So I think perhaps Martha Wells needs to just find her groove. Just need to figure out the most efficient way to get all of these things into the stories.
It's funny that you mention that because as far as I understand it, and I very well could be wrong, but as far as I understand it with the new writing model, Martha is here only for Dominaria.
Okay, that was a theory I had way back.
I'm relatively certain. I believe, I mean, it's been, at this point, 10 weeks at least since we listened to her interviews, but as far as I know, this is it. She's here for Dominaria, the 12 Dominaria stories, and then they move on to a new author. And that's their new model, is bringing in established authors and working off of it from there.
Okay, so each new plane gets a new author. Is that what it is?
Yeah, each new story, yeah.
Okay, I don't
each
like
new
that.
set, yeah.
My theory at the beginning, or before Dominaria was coming out, was okay, they're going to bring in a novelist to do a flavor-heavy plane, and then they'll do something different when we leave that flavor-heavy plane.
Right.
And I quickly changed my assumption based on the stories that were written, because I didn't feel that the stories were a good reflection of novelist writing flavor-heavy stories.
Right. So,
because they weren't, and it didn't feel like a novelist was writing them necessarily.
Right. And that's why I say this warrants a much larger discussion, and I'm hoping to get into that more when we get into the podcasts, the Magic Story podcasts, because there's a lot to unpack. And these are discussions that are, in a very minor way, at least from where I'm looking, they're happening on places like Twitter. I have not as frequently been trolling Reddit to check those discussion boards to see what people are saying there. I just don't have that many hours in the day.
There's got to be people that agree with me on this on Reddit.
No, absolutely. No, but that's not my point. Like, there's some discussions going on. For us, I'd like to have that discussion in a few weeks because we're still talking about these, and I want to give these the opportunity to be their own in their own video, and then, again, we can talk about them overarchingly, but I want to give the meat and potatoes of the story, individual stories themselves, the time that they deserve. Because again, like I said, this story was well written, and I don't want to throw it aside because it was terribly placed.
Yeah. Terribly
placed. And again, following issues that people had with last week's story as well, terribly placed, in our opinions.
Mm-hmm.
But there was the moment where you had Slimefoot kind of feeling to itself that it enjoyed being in the room with Liliana coming down and arguing with Gideon, and then there was the moment with Tiana and Arvad and Liliana, and I wrote down, I was like, Slimefoot likes gossip. Like, Slimefoot was like, this is interesting, I should go explore, and like went around, and after that point and started actually walking the ship. So it was like, wow, Slimefoot's that person at the office. Slimefoot is, the gossipy one. I hate the gossipy one. But that's Slimefoot, and Slimefoot's a cool character. So, there's that. Speaking of Slimefoot, first of all, I wanted to point out the cool thing was not understanding Tiana's sarcasm, but then also pointing out that Tiana ran her hand through her auburn growth and looked like she was going to rip it out because Slimefoot doesn't know what hair is. So that was funny. I enjoyed that. Again, a comedic moment, because there's a second where you're like, auburn growth, and you're like, oh, Slimefoot doesn't know what hair is.
He knows what auburn is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, very Jay Salone of them. But, okay. Let's talk about pictures. Because I wanna intersperse things that I'm upset by with things that I was okay with. So, let's talk about pictures.
I'm going to rip my auburn hair out. Growth, whatever. I've got a couple growths.
I can understand.
Just kidding.
Thanks for that information. In these stories, I have said in the past that I want more pictures. Because the art is so important. And these pictures, if you're reading it on your phone, you don't get as much of the impact of it, but still some. But if you're reading it on a laptop or a PC screen, you get the full image of these pictures. You can look at the detail that these pictures are drawn in. And you get to see the background details that don't make it onto the little card frames. Which is cool. As far as I'm concerned, if you don't have a need for a picture, don't force it.
Thank you.
But, or also, as it relates to this story, and again, if you read it, you know what I'm about to say. Why? Why did you need to show Slimefoot 3 times in a row? Not in total in the story where it was interspersed with others, literally in a row. Like, we would have forgotten what Slimefoot looks like since the last time we saw it.
Like,
even though
wait, you didn't notice he had babies in the picture. It's like, yeah, no, we saw this already.
Even though that's the literal only visual that would have attacked our eyes in between the last time that we saw Slimefoot and that time that we saw Slimefoot. Again...
And the third time that we saw Slimefoot.
And again, Slimefoot is a cool character.
Yes.
An interesting concept. Slimefoot the Stowaway. That is cool. It is interesting. I don't need to see it 3 times. Plus the fact that for those of us that were aware of preview season, that means we've seen it a million times now. Or are following along with anything related to Twitter and Reddit and memes and etc. I have seen Slimefoot 75 million times. I'm exaggerating maybe by a little.
Maybe people are making a lot of Slimefoot memes, so they wanted to show the actual picture of Slimefoot, because maybe too many people have seen the memes, and they just don't even realize what the card actually looked like.
And the card is an uncommon, so it's probably not that hard to see if you're playing the game at all, especially like limited or something like that. I'm sure you saw it at your pre-release or in a draft or something. Slimefoot is an uncommon, but also the fact that the wallpaper of Slimefoot was released today on the website as well. So you've got the Slimefoot wallpaper, you've got 3 pictures in this story, you've got the preview, you've got times that you could have seen it on the card itself. It was, oh my god. It's like, again...
There have been times in the past where they have done art that wasn't card art specifically for the stories.
I don't know if it was specifically for the stories. It might have been like promo art or whatever, but still.
Yeah, it might have been promo art, or it might have been concept art or whatever.
Not on cards.
Yeah, but it was not on card, art that none of the audience, the consumers, would have even seen if it hadn't been placed strategically within the stories.
Yep.
And I am actually insulted by the fact that they would show us the same picture 3 times in a row.
Yeah.
Make a new one, or don't show a picture. Done. That's it.
And it really, like, I didn't, and I'm not going to lie about it, I didn't 100%, like, I agreed with Amy's point of the fact that this story seemed like pandering, but I wasn't as upset by it as I felt like you were when you first mentioned it at the beginning.
Just at the beginning. When we got into the story, I was less upset about that, absolutely.
But after the 3 pictures in a row, then I was upset.
Upsetting.
Then I was upset that it was pandering. It was like, okay, we get it. You think people really like Slimefoot. And they do. And people have genuinely, I understand that people have been begging for Slimefoot backstory. Begging for it. So now people have it. Are you happy with what you got? Because I'm curious. Because I enjoy Slimefoot. I think they're a cool character. But I want to know. I'm not of the, oh my god, I need Slimefoot right now. It's so cute, I need it.
Yeah.
I wasn't that guy. I enjoyed it. It seemed cool. The fact that it got a story, if you had told me that at the beginning, right before the story started, if you said there's going to be an entire story devoted to Slimefoot going around the Weatherlight and meeting with all the other characters and giving its opinion on the other characters interacting with one another, I would have been salivating for it. I would have been looking forward to that.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And again, based on its placement, I was not that way.
Right.
It was a lot of Slimefoot though, and it was like, was it necessary? Did you need to do it that much? And again, for those of you hardcore Slimefoot fans out there, I want to know. I want to know if you feel like this is exactly what you wanted, you don't think they should have changed a single thing. Do you feel like it was too much? Do you feel like it was not enough?
I feel like it was not enough. I think if you're going to do a Slimefoot story, commit to a Slimefoot story. If it's going to be from Slimefoot's point of view, make it actually from Slimefoot's point of view.
Okay.
And actually do the whole story from beginning to end of Slimefoot.
Okay.
Instead of this weird sort of back and forth thing. This weird sort of, it's Slimefoot's point of view, but not really. And, well, we're going to integrate a lot of the other characters, like a lot, to kind of take away from Slimefoot. But then we'll just kind of randomly throw him back in a lot, so it seems like it's a Slimefoot story. when in reality it's not.
Right. So
Like, it just felt like they weren't committed to it being a Slimefoot story. It felt like it was a regular story, and then they just injected a lot of Slimefoot because they were pandering to people who liked Slimefoot, and they just took a regular story and just put Slimefoot in a lot to make it seem like it had been written about Slimefoot all along. And it's like, no, it wasn't.
I don't know that I fully buy that, but I don't think that you're like, I'm not like you're wrong. Like that.
But
it's
you
definitely
disagree
possible.
with that? Okay.
Well, because I don't know that I agree that it wasn't Slimefoot from the beginning and that they shoehorned it in there because of the pandering, but they may have cranked it up more because of that. But again, I have no idea. We have no inside track. This
I
is
wish
just
it was just shoehorning because
so
then it would be, a light amount instead of a lot.
But let us know what team you're on. Are you team Slimefoot all the way? Are you team no Slimefoot at all? Or are you like us, team like, oh yeah, Slimefoot's cool.
Yeah,
well
that's the thing. Like, I would have loved to have a not Slimefoot story or a Slimefoot story, and instead they gave us a weirdly in the middle, amalgamation of a Slimefoot story with a not Slimefoot story, and it just didn't work.
And to go along with that, let's talk about the Gatewatch members that we saw today. Because I partially mentioned Liliana, and it's kind of about all I have for Liliana today specifically.
Yeah,
but
she was really just not even in
there. It was in there a little, and they tried to give you a Liliana moment, as I've discussed, right? It's her story-ish. So they kind of tried to give her a moment and kind of showing her interacting with Gideon, and then Slimefoot overhearing Gideon murmuring and getting annoyed by her as she storms off. But speaking of Gideon, there was that moment where Teferi and Gideon are in the room together, and Teferi's like, oh yeah, it's a Thallid. And Gideon's like, that's weird. But also not my problem.
Right. And then he just ignores it.
Right. And then goes back, and this is the quote that I wrote down. Gideon goes back to sharpening the blade. Now, again, based on Amy's discussion that she just had, the perspective was very odd in this story. So I don't know whether the phrase sharpening the blade is because Slimefoot, it's like the only sword Slimefoot's ever seen, and it's just the random sword that Gideon's been carrying around that we've heard about in the stories, or if it's supposed to be the Black Blade, because that wouldn't make any sense.
Well, but if we think about the fact that the story started with Slimefoot in the past, maybe it ends with Slimefoot in the future.
Except that then, as they continue the story, at the end of it, they see the stronghold coming up ahead of them where they're going, and since the blade is at the stronghold, it's not possible for Gideon to have the blade yet. Mm-hmm. I don't know why the word the is there instead of the word his, polishing or sharpening his blade as opposed to sharpening blade. Right, thank you, as opposed to the blade, because the blade would, if written that way and not referring to the Black Blade, that would mean that the sword needed to have been referenced in the prior sentence or earlier in the paragraph. And I missed it if it was there. Maybe it was there and I missed it. But why? Why word it that way? It's so weird because it took me out of the story where I was like, wait, he's got the Black Blade already? He shouldn't have the Black Blade yet. It's at the stronghold. That was literally a big talking point of episode 9 last week, where they were like, Gideon, are you going to agree to use this sword? And he was like, I don't really want to, but if we get it from the stronghold, maybe I will. And it's like, okay, cool. But now in this story, it's like he's sharpening the blade. What blade? What's happening? Right? Where did this come from? So, and we didn't discuss the continuity issues last week, and we still won't. We partially touched on it. But again, that will be saved for future episodes. We're talking about this week's story. And again, its placement among all of the others. And after the debacle that was last week's continuity errors, even just sure, I'm nitpicking the word the. I get it. But it's kind of a big deal. Yeah. Because you called it the blade when the blade that Gideon is going to be wielding soon is a big deal.
Yeah, and it's
a
not
huge
one that
callback.
he has yet.
Right. So that bothered the crap out of me. I read that and I was like, what? And I wrote it down. I had to talk about it. So let me know your thoughts on that. Again, maybe I just missed the reference to Gideon's sword earlier, and so it's the blade because they talked about his sword. That's the easy fix. I fear that that's not what actually happened. But that being said, then we move on, as I said, further talking about the Gatewatch, we move on to Chandra. And we had that short, weirdly shoehorned in moment of Chandra and JaAR practicing their fire magic, or Chandra practicing her fire magic under the tutelage of JaAR, up on the deck. And we had that moment of, I believe it was Raph being like, they're practicing fire on a wooden ship? And it's like, yes, but... And Slimefoot being afraid of fire, like, that's what led to us knowing about that, because Slimefoot was like, heard the fire noises when it was down in the hull with everybody else, and then went up to the surface to see what it was.
Yeah, it's like, no.
Even though the last time Slimefoot was presented with fire that we are aware of, it literally ran away from it until it was exhausted, and then kept running, right? Where it felt like it couldn't have held on much longer, and then finally made it to the crest of the ship. And then this time it heard more fire, and it was like, ooh, and ran towards it, leaving its spores behind.
That's yet another continuity error.
Or just poor characterization, as you've discussed. Like, why would a being that could be decimated by fire hear fire and go, I'm going to check it out?
Right.
That doesn't make sense. And got stopped by Karn, so there was that interesting moment of, like, Karn and Slimefoot conversing with one another.
Yeah, which was weird.
And by conversing, I mean Karn did all the talking and waited for Slimefoot to respond a couple times, and Slimefoot kind of motioned or whatever, and that was it. But that was just to show us Chandra is practicing with JaAR, right? And you have, because now they're at the stronghold. And so, I'll say it again this week. Seemingly next week, we are getting to the culmination of all of these stories.
Hopefully.
Until Yargle needs a story next week, who knows? But yeah, like it really does seem like that's where we're going. And that's fine.
Don't even say that.
But it was...
If next week is a Yargle story, I'm blaming you.
But I guess it was just... this Chandra JaAR piece was odd. It was oddly placed. It was the only non-Slimefoot centered portion of the story. And then it cut back to Slimefoot for a paragraph. And then it was over. And it was like, oh, so you just really wanted us to see JaAR and Chandra, but you didn't want to end the Slimefoot story on Chandra and JaAR. So you just then put a random Slimefoot paragraph at the end also. But
I disagree, because I don't feel like the rest of it was even about Slimefoot.
Fair. Again, the fact that Slimefoot was the promo art for the story and Slimefoot's art was in the story 3 times, I think it's valid for me to call it a Slimefoot story. But I don't wholly disagree with your point that you made about the characterization.
I think they're just trying to make it seem like a Slimefoot story.
Yeah. So, but
Sorry.
No, it's fine. But about this Chandra and JaAR portion. All it really was Chandra is practicing her skills. She is practicing her control over her abilities because she's a red mage, and so she's going to fly off the handle. She's going to be emotional. She's going to act on those emotions.
Right.
That's how that works. And she discusses those emotions a bit and kind of gets a little bit introspective when discussing why she was so upset that she kind of blew off Mother Luti and yelled at her before she knew she was JaAR, which...
Right.
was what pissed JaAR off enough to say, that's it, I'm not training you, I don't care. And the reason was, what was the reason for Chandra being so upset? Who left?
Nissa.
Who is clearly a better character and planeswalker than Ajani is. But you have Nissa being talked about, better than Ajani. You have her being talked about and discussed to further this discussion that was had, I believe it was last week, with Chandra talking about how much she misses the planeswalker that's better than Ajani.
Which is who?
Nissa. This is getting so much worse.
I seriously was just going to sit here and, like, just keep it going on, and I wasn't going to laugh at you, but I already did.
We'll talk about that at the end, guys. But, yeah, it was further characterizing Chandra missing Nissa, and it's interesting. I have this written at the end, but I'll talk about it now. On Friday, we're filming this on Wednesday. That's when the story came out. This will come out on Thursday. So on Friday, depending on when you're watching this, it's announcement day. And everybody is buzzing off of the fact that they will be officially announcing the fall set and what it's going to be. Because after this, we have Core Set 2019, not, counting full set releases, not supplemental product like Battle Bond and stuff like that. You've got Core Set 2019 coming out. And then you've got the fall set, which we don't know what it is yet. There is a lot of Vorthos speculation that it is Ravnica. And honestly, did I almost hit you? Ravnica!
I love Ravnica!
And if it is Ravnica, it makes the most sense based on where we're going in the story. If we had not just been to Zendikar, I might think that they would try to swerve us by going back to Zendikar a bit, since that's where Nissa went, and that may be where Chandra wants to go. Nissa, the better planeswalker than Ajani.
That is correct.
Oh, God. But since that's where Nissa is, the better planeswalker than Ajani, that is where I would have thought we might have gone, again, if we weren't just there. If I were trying to find a plane that was not so obvious, because since everyone is saying it's going to be Ravnica, it's going to be Ravnica, it's going to be Ravnica, sometimes they might try to throw a curveball and get it to be something else
and
that is not as obvious.
Slimefoot into it for no reason.
Slimefoot actually is the one that's going to take Teferi's Spark.
Yeah. That'd be great, actually.
No, it wouldn't.
Oh, no, I would love that. Everyone else would hate it, but I would love it.
So yeah, there was that. And we'll see where that goes with how we're going to, if it is Ravnica, and we'll probably talk about it slightly next week, but if it is Ravnica, what that means for the next set and what that means for, I can't even avoid talking about her. What that means for Nissa, the better planeswalker than Ajani, whether she will be on Ravnica with them or whether she is truly sitting out the Bolus fight, because I don't see it. I don't see that happening.
Yeah.
I just don't.
Me neither.
But, again, neither here nor there, not this story. We'll talk about it.
It
But
might be the kind of thing where Chandra then goes to Zendikar to try and entice Nissa to come back.
she's a better planeswalker than Ajani.
Yeah. And then, so, I don't know, before the fight with Bolus, maybe they're doing that, and then they rejoin the rest of them.
Right. So there's
the actual
right. So
fight
there might
with
be
Bolus.
No, that's fair. That there might be a bit of,
especially since Liliana is going to be on the wrong side of that.
well, right, and especially because then Chandra can go to Nissa kind of better planeswalker than Jenny, tail between her legs and say, you were right, Liliana's terrible,
Right.
Please come help us. Who knows? Like I said, we will see. So, as I promised, at the end of this story, I promised there would be a wrap-up. So, do you have anything else that you wanted to say on this one before we get to this point? Because this is kind of a big one.
No, go ahead.
In terms of storytelling, and I'm not an expert. I've done writing things, we both have, and short story stuff. But when it comes to...
I don't think I have.
You took that whole class on short stories.
Well, yeah, but that wasn't me writing anything.
That's true.
Really.
But in consuming media, whether it be television shows, short stories, episodic, whatever, an episode like this one, a light-hearted, fun interlude, is used typically in one way. And that is to break up heavy topics. And whether that is emotionally heavy, combat heavy, who knows? But either way, or both. But that's what these kinds of stories are used for. You use them to break up those situations, to break up the confusion and the questions and the fighting, right? You're on this super high, right? But maybe the fight's over. Maybe somebody got hurt and you want to know what's going to happen next, but you're all the way up here. And what this story would have then been meant to do is put the brakes on. And at first you might be upset like we were and you're like, what the hell? I wanted to know what happened next.
Right.
And then you enjoy the lighthearted, fun aspect of the story because...
it's meant to sort of bring you back to a relaxed state.
Yes. It's a palate cleanser.
Instead of the constant peril that, can be these stories.
Right. Because that's how entertainment works. If you're on a high the whole time, or you're like white knuckle stressed the whole time, by the end of it you'll be so exhausted you won't even be able to look back on it.
Right.
And
eventually
process
it'll get old and you'll just be like, okay, I can't even deal with this anymore.
So these types of stories, this week's type of a story, allows you to take a breath, to lower your shoulders, to unclench and relax a bit before you go back to, maybe further climactic moments or the falling off of the climax. When you don't use this kind of a story is when you haven't had a climax yet. There was nothing that led up to this story that warranted this story being here in this way, like I said at the top, like we said at the top, after last week's bringing everyone together. If that was the case, if you wanted to do this story, you wouldn't technically, I guess, have been able to. Because you wouldn't have had Jaya and Chandra and Karn. But to be completely honest, if you already know who Slimefoot is, you could have had the Jaya, Chandra, Karn, Slimefoot moment at the end of a different story. So put in Slimefoot after they meet up with Teferi, but before they pick up Jaya, Chandra, and Karn.
Yeah.
That would have been the perfect place for it. You still would have had the cool Raph and Shauna moments. You still would have had Tiana and Arvad. You still would have had Joyra and Teferi and Gideon and Liliana. Literally everyone would have been there, but the last weirdly shoved in crap about Jaya and Chandra and Karn wouldn't have been there until later.
It was kind of cool because that kind of reiterates to the audience that he is not good at picking up on the fact that this thing can't actually talk back to him.
Right, but like I said, especially if you wanted to pander to people who liked Slimefoot, that's a way to get more Slimefoot into later stories.
Right.
And then you wouldn't have the culmination story, because you could have had last week's culmination story and then had that Slimefoot bit at the end. I understand that you wanted to leave it off at the big moment of Teferi and his spark and etc., because that's a big deal.
Yes, that was a great ending. And I will say, I don't know if I mentioned this in last week's JaAR or not, but I will say that was probably the first story of this entire arc where I was actually able to say, okay, that's a good ending to a story.
Right. You said that to me. I don't believe you said it in the episode.
Yeah.
Yes.
When the story was over, I said, okay, and that's the end.
Right.
And that was the first time that I knew that was the end, when it was the end.
Yeah, as opposed to being like it came out of nowhere.
As opposed to you just saying, okay, and the story's over now. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, yeah. So that's my feeling, our feelings on this story, is that in a vacuum, this was a good story. Combined with, not even combined with anything, the fact that it was episode 10 of 12 means that it was not a good story.
Right.
Because why? Why was it here?
No need for it.
Why? And again, maybe you agree with me, maybe you disagree with me, but I truly believe if you took the Chandra Jaya Karn part out and put it somewhere else at the end of a different story, like at the end of what last week's story was, or towards the end if you wanted to do the Joyra Teferi part at the end. I don't know why I'm stumbling over things now. I just called them corn. It was like Teferi and Karn mixed together.
Maybe you're hungry.
I'm not. But, the fact, if you wanted to do Joyra Teferi last, because that's a good ending to that story, do that. But put the Slimefoot part in the middle somewhere, because you would have already introduced Slimefoot maybe the week before. Or 2 weeks before. And so you would have had another moment of, oh cool, Slimefoot again. And it would have been small, but it wouldn't have been smaller than the Chandra Jaya moment that we got at the end of this one, weirdly. That's my personal opinion. As always, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Does that make sense to you? Were we too harsh on this story? Were we not harsh enough on, on this story? Let us know what you thought in the comments down below.
Please do.
Because this is getting to be a set a set of stories that are very much worth discussing for better or worse.
Yeah.
I think. And I really we've had some amazing discussions in the comments. I am loving it. So please keep it up.
Thank you guys
You guys are doing an amazing job talking with one another, talking with us, telling us things.
Yes.
It's amazing. And I encourage you, if you haven't seen it, to go back to some of those previous episodes and read the comments, because very, very insightful, very interesting points being brought up.
Yes.
Keep it up.
Yeah.
Keep it up, because you guys are brilliant.
Yeah.
So
it kind of makes me sad that we didn't have that kind of a response from the audience on some of the older stories, because I feel like there were a lot of like missing parts of analysis that could have happened with the audience in those stories.
Yeah.
A little bit more than these ones, because these ones aren't as good, in my opinion.
Well,
but
and a good way to help us out with that, and this was not a segue that we thought of, but or planned, but a good way to help us out with that is to share this with your friends. We are growing super slowly, and it's something that, I'm not in this for the money. I'm really not, which is good.
Good thing, because we don't make any.
No, and we never have. And yet we've done this for, look down below. However many, we've done over 100 episodes of this, and we're doing it because we love it.
Yeah.
But if it'll bring more voices to the conversation, if it'll bring more people into the fold, if you will, to give us their opinions and to interact with all of you.
Wasn't that a magic card?
Into the Fold
Into
was.
the Fold.
It sure was, and I thought of that too.
I remember the picture on it.
That was a cult, though. We're totally not a cult yet.
No.
Did I say yet?
Yes.
But yeah, please feel free to share this with people who might enjoy it.
Out.
It helps. It helps us out a lot. And again, it brings more voices to the conversation, which we would really appreciate.
Yes.
And hopefully you guys would too. So, that is going to do it.
We want to hear what you guys have to say, and hopefully you guys are starting to care about what the rest of you have to say as well, and, actually really make it a discussion about these stories, because, to us, that's been something that we've cared about since day one, which is why we make these videos, but, it helps Avorthos be Avorthos, I think.
That's true.
To be able to read these stories and then have an in-depth analysis on them.
It's almost like we're allowing Vorthos to show off their...
Hashtag Vorthos pride. If you do a ridiculous segue every time, I'm gonna say it like that.
As soon as you said it, you were like, it lets the people be Avorthos, and I'm like, come on, how do I not go there now? If you're curious about why I truly believe, and I'm not in any way being forced to say, that Nissa is a better planeswalker than a Johnny, look no further than the video that will be popping up on the screen somewhere. It is our Dominaria Fiancé Finance Bundle Battle, and even if you feel like you know who won, because to be honest, if you've watched basically any of them, not much has changed, but I will say, regardless of that fact, this one needs to be watched to be believed. I have no idea how my luck was so bad.
This was a good one, guys.
Oh my god, yeah, good one. Oh my god. So look forward to that for a nice long time. Hopefully there won't be a lot of Nissa, better than a Johnny, because she's gone. So hopefully we won't have to talk about her much.
Hopefully we will.
But that has been my pitch. This has been another episode of JaAR here on Geek for All. Once again, I want to thank you guys so much for watching, for communicating with us, for checking us out on Facebook and Twitter. Those links are also down in the description along with the story. I have been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And as we always say, guys, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.